Who are you when no one is watching? What if your true self is actually a dormant version of you, shaped by expectations that were never truly yours? Is your mind really your own, or just an echo of other people's voices?
Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that. How many times have you felt like you were acting against your own nature, trying to fit into a version of yourself that made no sense to you? All of us, at some point, have looked in the mirror and felt like something was off, like we were living someone else's life. Maybe you grew up being told you needed to be more rational, when everything in you was crying out for emotion. Or maybe you always saw the world through dreamy eyes, but were forced to keep your feet chained to someone else's version of reality. This video is for you, the one who's ever felt out of place without knowing why. Today, we're not just going to explore Jung's 4 personality types, but also what they reveal about the deeper truth of who you really are. And maybe, for the first time, you'll begin to understand why certain decisions drain you, while others make you feel alive. Since childhood, we've been molded like clay by invisible hands, culture, parents, teachers, and our own efforts to be accepted. You're too sensitive. You need to be more logical. Stop dreaming so much. How many times have you heard things like this? And how many of those phrases, without you realizing it, turned into inner walls, quietly limiting who you are? Carl Jung believed that most people live under an identity that isn't truly theirs. He wasn't talking about being fake. He was talking about conditioning, that silent programming that makes us believe we're a certain type of person, when in fact, we're just playing a role. Maybe you have a natural impulse to create, imagine, and connect abstract ideas, but you're stuck in a job that only requires repetition. Or maybe you have a practical, realistic mind that sees the world with clarity, yet you've spent your life feeling inadequate for not dreaming big enough. And the cruelest part of all, society celebrates certain ways of being and suffocates others. Being logical is admired. Being sensitive is seen as weakness. But what if all of that is upside down? Jung proposed that each of us operates from an early age with a dominant function, a natural lens through which we see and interact with the world. But that lens is rarely respected. More often than not, it's suppressed, mocked, or simply ignored. And when that happens, a symptom appears, one that we've all felt to some degree: inner misalignment. It's that feeling of functioning in the world, but without any real enthusiasm, as if life is made of constant effort, of heavy decisions, of relationships that drain you. But here's the turning point. You weren't born to function. You were born to flow. Imagine living in harmony with how your mind actually works, making decisions with ease, feeling energized by your choices, building relationships that don't drain you, but nourish you, getting to know your dominant function, and more importantly, identifying what you've been repressing in yourself is the first step toward transformation. And it's not a journey about changing who you are, but rather about remembering who you've always been before the world taught you to forget. Have you ever felt exhausted after a full day of social interactions, even though you were smiling the entire time? Or maybe you've noticed that when you're alone, your mind comes alive in an almost magical way, but society keeps pressuring you to be more present. Perhaps you've gotten used to thinking that this means you're an introvert, or maybe someone once labeled you as too extroverted just because you enjoy lively environments. But what if I told you that all these definitions are misguided? Carl Jung revolutionized the way we understand human behavior by showing that introversion and extroversion have nothing to do with being shy or talkative. These labels that pop culture has thrown at us are crude simplifications of something much deeper. To Jung, the real difference lies in the direction of your psychic energy. Introverts direct their energy inward, toward ideas, reflections, and inner imagery. Extroverts, on the other hand, channel theirs outward, toward people, experiences, and external events. This distinction changes everything. An introvert can be an excellent communicator, a performing artist, or even a politician, so long as they find time to recharge in silence and solitude. And an extrovert can be quiet, absolutely, but they need connection, external stimulation, and to be out in the world to feel alive. The confusion lies in believing that visible behavior defines who we are. But behavior is just the tip of the iceberg. The human psyche operates on much subtler levels, and if you judge yourself only by what others can see, you're missing out on accessing your true essence. Have you ever forced yourself to act in a way that seemed right to others, but felt deeply wrong to you? That feeling of being at a party and sensing you're wearing a mask? Or being alone, yet overcome with an unbearable restlessness because every part of you craves connection? These are signs that you might be living against your dominant nature. Jung didn't see introversion and extroversion as boxes we're meant to fit into forever. He saw them as psychic attitudes, tendencies that shape the way we exist in the world. And while we all possess both, one will always be dominant. It's like having a dominant eye. You see with both, but one gives the world its clarity. Now think about this. How many times have you ignored your dominant attitude because it felt wrong to those around you? How many career choices, friendships, or lifestyle decisions have you made trying to adapt instead of express yourself? And worse, how many times have you judged someone for being different from you? An introvert might see the extrovert as shallow or overly hyper. The extrovert might judge the introvert as cold or uninterested. But all of this is projection, rooted in our own struggle to accept that there are multiple, equally valid ways of living. This understanding changes our relationships, deepens our compassion, reshapes the way we see others, and most importantly, the way we treat ourselves. And here's the most important point. Introversion and extroversion are just the entrance to the labyrinth. Jung saw these attitudes as gateways that direct energy inward or outward, and through these gateways emerge the 4 fundamental ways of processing reality: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. Each person has one of these 4 functions as their dominant one, and they combine with the psychic attitude, introverted or extroverted, to form each individual's unique psychological type. So the real question isn't, am I an introvert or an extrovert? It's, what is my dominant function, and how does it express itself, inwardly or outwardly? You could be an introverted thinker, a quiet philosopher who dissects ideas in your mind, or an extroverted thinker, a strategist who structures the world around you. You might be an extroverted intuitive, a visionary inventor always chasing the next big idea, or an introverted intuitive, the mystic who senses deep patterns no one else can see. Can you see how this combination opens up an entire universe of possibilities? Have you ever stopped to wonder why some decisions completely drain you, while others make you feel like you're in a state of flow, as if life is finally moving to the right rhythm? It's not a coincidence. It's because, from the very beginning of your life, your mind has been operating according to a dominant psychological function, a natural and deeply rooted way of processing the world that shapes everything: your choices, your struggles, your talents, your fears. Jung called this the dominant or primary function. But here's the crucial point. Most people never discover what theirs is, because from a young age we're taught to look outward, to fit in, to meet expectations. And so we spend years, sometimes decades, using a lens that isn't ours, forcing a logic that doesn't belong to us, pretending to feel things we don't, suppressing an imagination that could have set us free. Jung identified 4 main ways of perceiving and judging reality: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. Each of these functions is like an internal compass that guides how you interpret what you live, what you feel, and what you choose. And more than that, each of these functions can express itself in either an introverted or extroverted way, creating not just 4, but 8 different modes of expression. But don't worry about the labels for now. What matters is understanding what's going on inside you, because when your dominant function is ignored, or worse, repressed, everything feels heavy, disconnected, artificial. But when you align with it, the world reveals itself with remarkable clarity. If your mind is governed by the thinking function, you're probably guided by logic, analysis, and structure. The world needs to make sense to you. Problems are opportunities for organization. But if that thinking is extroverted, you tend to apply logic to the outer world, creating systems, strategies, and practical solutions. You're like a mental engineer, seeking efficiency and clarity in action. Now, if your thinking is introverted, logic lives inside you. Your process is quiet, deep, almost invisible to others. You break down ideas until you reach their core. You question everything, and often you keep your conclusions to yourself, not out of shyness, but because you're still refining your own truth. On the other hand, if your dominant function is feeling, your compass doesn't point to what's rational, but to what's meaningful. You judge the world based on harmony, connection, and authenticity. If your feeling is extroverted, you sense others as if they were you. You pick up on the emotional atmosphere around you with an almost instinctive sensitivity. You know what to say, when to say it, how to keep the peace. But there's a cost. Sometimes you lose yourself because you're always trying to take care of others. Introverted feeling, however, is quiet and intense. It's a deep ethics, a personal morality that no one sees but that drives every decision. This type rarely seeks approval. They act because they feel it's right, even if no one understands. And because of that, they often feel alone in a world that doesn't seem to speak the same language of the heart. Now imagine someone dominated by the sensing function. This is the type of person who lives in the here and now. Everything is real, tangible, sensory. There's no room for baseless abstractions. If this sensing is extroverted, the person dives into the world with all 5 senses wide open. They act, react, execute. They're practical, direct, and to the point. They live with their feet firmly on the ground, but sometimes they lose their way because they're constantly chasing the next stimulus. Introverted sensing, on the other hand, is made of memories, inner experiences, and deep sensory impressions. It values what has been lived, what is known, what has stood the test of time. It's reliable, consistent, but can resist change out of fear of losing stability. And then we have the intuition function, perhaps the most mysterious of all. Those who are guided by it don't see the world as it is, but as it could be. They live through visions, patterns, and invisible connections. If the intuition is extroverted, the person becomes an endless source of ideas, possibilities, and inventions. The world is an open field for discovery, but there's a risk of never finishing anything, since there's always a new possibility lurking around the corner. Introverted intuition, on the other hand, is like a quiet flame. It doesn't explode. It illuminates slowly. People with this function often have sudden, almost prophetic insights. They don't explain. They just know. They feel that something is coming, even if they can't say why. But because they're so inward-focused, they struggle to express what they feel. And because of that, the world often views them with suspicion. What Jung offers us here isn't a formula to box in our identity, but a lens through which to see the complexity of the psyche. You're not just one of these functions. You have all of them, but in a specific order. And while your dominant function governs your mind, the others, especially the inferior function, dwell in the shadows. They're often the ones sabotaging our relationships, our decisions, our emotions. Have you ever felt like something inside you is sabotaging your decisions, even when everything seems logically right? Have you ever overreacted in simple situations, as if there's a part of you can't control, one that insists on showing up when you least expect it? Jung called this the inferior function, the part of your personality that's been pushed into the basement of your consciousness, repressed, neglected, ignored. And it's exactly there that your greatest potential for growth lies. The inferior function is like a forgotten child in a dark corner of the soul. It doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits for the right moment to show itself. Sometimes it comes during emotional crises. Sometimes in our dreams. Other times in our projections onto others. It holds everything we avoid feeling or admitting. Unexpressed anger, denied vulnerability, the need for control disguised as altruism. The inferior function is the opposite of the dominant function. And that's exactly why it bothers us so much, because it forces us out of our mental and emotional comfort zone. If you're a rational thinker, your inferior function might be feeling. That's why you might feel lost when it comes to dealing with intense emotions, your own or other people's. You may distance yourself, shut down, become cold, not because you don't feel, but because you never learned how to deal with what you feel. If you're a feeling type, your inferior function might be thinking. And under pressure, you may act on emotional impulse, without logical clarity. Then comes the guilt, the questioning. Why can't I be more rational? The truth is, you can. It's just that you've never worked that muscle before. If you're a practical sensing type, you might get lost in abstractions, avoiding long-term thinking. And if you're an idealistic intuitive, you might completely ignore the present, stumbling over the details you consider irrelevant, but that are actually essential. The inferior function is always trying to get our attention. Hey, there's a part of you that's being forgotten. And the more you ignore that voice, the louder it gets, through anxiety, outbursts, or silent self-sabotage. That's why, in Jung's words, the thing you most need will be found where you least want to look. But this forgotten function isn't just a weakness, it's a treasure map. It holds exactly what you need in order to become whole. Jung called this integration process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, not just who the world expected you to be. And that process is not linear, nor is it comfortable, because it requires you to confront everything you've avoided within yourself. It demands that you stop running, that you face the mirror, not the physical one, but the inner mirror, the one that reflects the fear of not being enough, the weight of expectations, the hidden desires you haven't dared to name. But when you start to integrate that shadow, something extraordinary happens. You stop living at war with yourself. You stop judging your emotions as weakness. You begin to accept that feeling is also a way of knowing, that rationalizing doesn't always mean avoiding, that imagining is not escaping, that acting in the present doesn't mean giving up on your dreams. You begin to understand that you don't have to be just one thing, that you don't have to live life as if playing a fixed role in a play. You can be whole. The inferior function, when integrated, is no longer a threat. It becomes a silent ally, a reservoir of strength, wisdom, and balance. The thinker learns to feel. The sensitive learns to think. The practical begins to dream. The dreamer learns to build. And just like that, a new version of yourself is born. Not better, not worse, but more honest, more connected, more human. Jung believed that this integration was the true purpose of human existence. Not to be perfect, not to be successful, but to be true, to become who you are, with all your light and shadow. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And maybe now, those words make more sense than ever. Because if you've made it this far, something in you has already started to awaken. The gaze that sees itself with more compassion. The listening that recognizes its own silences. The heart that begins to accept even what once felt unacceptable. The truth is, you were never broken. You were just fragmented. And now, with all the pieces laid out in front of you, the choice is yours. To keep living behind the mask of a dominant function, or to begin integrating the whole of who you are. The question is no longer, what's your type? But rather, which parts of you are you still denying? This is the invitation, and this is the journey, not to become someone else, but to finally come home to yourself. The truth is, for most of our lives, we were trained to fit in, to choose a path, a posture, a way of being, and stay there, stuck, as if the complexity of being human could be reduced to a label or 4 letters on a test. But Jung showed us something infinitely deeper. You are not just your dominant function. You are also everything you've repressed, denied, or forgotten. You are the whole, the clarity of reason and the chaos of emotion, the solidity of the present and the mystery of what's yet to come. You no longer have to live as if you're fighting against yourself. You can live in harmony with your own nature. And that harmony begins with self-knowledge, not the superficial kind, built from cliches or magazine horoscopes, but an honest kind of knowing, sometimes uncomfortable, that demands courage to face what you'd rather not see, yet sets you free. Because when you understand how your mind works, your inner conflicts gain context, your pain gains meaning, and your choices stop being just reactions. They become conscious expressions of who you truly are. And maybe, throughout this video you felt that, a quiet recognition, a memory, as if something within you is slowly awakening, returning home. Now I want to offer you something that's not for everyone, but it is for you who made it this far, searching for deeper answers about who you are and where your life is heading. I created something that goes beyond a book. I built a map for the soul, a manual that blends science, philosophy, and critical thinking to help you break mental patterns, question your identity, and rebuild yourself from the ground up. This isn't an e-book full of pretty quotes. It's a guide for those who can no longer bear to live on autopilot. If something inside you is asking for change, for growth, for clarity, then this is your moment. Click the pinned comment and access the Manual of Self-Transformation now. Don't read it out of curiosity. Read it because your life depends on it. And if you decide to begin this journey, you won't be the same at the end of the path. I remember clearly the moment I first encountered Jung's theory. I was sitting in an old library flipping through the yellowed pages of a book I had no intention of reading, but there, between technical terms and diagrams of the mind, something lit up inside me. For the first time, I felt like someone had put into words what I had always felt, but never knew how to explain. As if Jung was speaking directly to me, whispering, "You're not broken. You're just trying to live with a part of yourself that's still asleep." And maybe that's exactly what you needed to hear today, that you're not wrong, that you don't need to mold yourself to fit into a shape that was never made for you, that there is a kind of freedom you don't earn out there, but in here, when you truly accept yourself, with shadows and light, with reason and emotion. If this journey touched you in any way, if some part of you saw yourself in this psychological mirror we've explored together, then I invite you to take it one step further. Leave a comment. Which of these functions do you think you've been repressing? Which part of you is asking to be heard? And if this video made sense to you, well, you already know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Not out of obligation, but because we both know the algorithm is a lot like the inferior function. It works better when it's acknowledged. And let's be honest, if you've made it this far, it's because you deserve more content like this, the kind that doesn't oversimplify, but deepens. And before you go, take a look at the videos showing up on your screen. One of them might just hold the next big shift in your awareness. But which one? You'll only know if you watch, because this journey of self-discovery is just beginning.